your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks for joining us for our Week in Review. A Lethbridge police officer received the Medal of Bravery at a recent ceremony in Ottawa. Constable Marco Pagliarici received the honor by Governor General Mary Simon. Constable Pagliarici is the first Lethbridge police officer to receive the honor in the 120-year history of the LPS. The award was to recognize Pagliarici's heroic efforts when he rescued several residents from a fire in the Bridge Villa Estates trailer park back in 2017. Pagliarici has been a member of the Lethbridge Police since 2001. He is also a decorated Canadian Forces veteran of 23 years. Higher interest rates are forcing a market correction in some of Canada's larger real estate markets, including Vancouver and Toronto. House prices have been dropping in some regions, but that's not necessarily the case here in southwestern Alberta. Jeff Reimer is a real estate agent with Royal LePage South Country Real Estate in Lethbridge, and he joined our own Hal Roberts to discuss this.
Jeff, what are you seeing here in the Windy City? Are house prices also dropping?
Well, things have certainly calmed. The interest rate hikes, and the feds are saying they may do that again, and continued slightward up pressure there. They just want to keep stalling inflation, right? That's a big problem for the politicians. They caused the problem, so they're just going to do whatever they can to stop inflation. But it's calmed it, but Lethbridge is still very stable. Southern Alberta, very stable. We've got good farmers, we have industry, agriculture. You know, oil affects us, but even with the price of oil, that's helping our province. So we're finding it right now that the market's pretty stable. It has calmed. There's a bit more listings than there was the first half of the year. And so that's, you know, the higher end prices calmed that more than the lower prices. You know, starter houses, still some tough to find some good houses. So you got to really look and be on the ball and jump on them new, especially like under 250. It's really slim pickings for starter houses.
Yeah, let's touch on that for just a moment here, Jeff. How much of an impact are higher mortgage rates having, especially on first-time home buyers?
It's definitely calming down the amount that they can spend, because it affects their qualifying and then, of course, their payments. So it is calming that down a little bit, but the buying is still strong. The rates have almost doubled, though, in the last couple of years. That can mean about 2 years ago, they're maybe right around 2.3 for a 5-year fixed. And right now, you're looking at about 4.59 for the best fixed rates. They went up a little higher, closer to 5, and then maybe came down again.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff. That was Jeff Reimer, realtor with Royal LePage South Country Real Estate, joining us from Lethbridge.
As part of Truth and Reconciliation Week, Lethbridge College is unveiling a new exhibit. It will showcase some of the experiences of the 60s scoop survivors. The manager of Indigenous Services at the college, Lowell Yellowhorn, says this type of exhibit is important since it will educate the students about how many challenges, past and present, many Indigenous people face.
One of those issues is the child welfare system. You know, there's a lot of children who have been impacted by child welfare challenges, as well. You know, it's not just inclusive of just residential schools. You know, we have to factor in a lot of education into all the systematic challenges that Indigenous people have faced over the years.
Truth and Reconciliation Week at the college begins on Tuesday, September 27th. Lethbridge Police, along with other first responders, took part in a training exercise on Wednesday morning. The event was a full-scale mock event to help emergency crews respond to an incident accordingly. The simulation included actors who pretended to sustain injuries from a mass casualty incident. The responders were faced with the challenge on how to handle the situation in a timely manner. The city says they aim to do these training sessions once a year, but are legislated to do it every 4 years. With the high cost of living right now, Alberta food banks are experiencing record high demand. The Alberta Motor Association has partnered with Food Banks Alberta and select grocery stores across the province to collect non-perishable food for vulnerable children and their families.
Our corporate responsibility pillars at AMA are threefold. One is child security, another is sustainability and environmental causes, and our third is fighting food insecurity in the province. Food insecurity is at the root cause of a lot of social problems that people face in Alberta, and it's a symptom of other issues. So it's a very direct way that we can help improve the lives of Albertans.
After the break, we have the headlines from around our province. Keep it right here. As you will hear later in our program, some Canadians are considering a move to Alberta, and it so happens Premier Jason Kenney recently announced the launch of the next phase of the Alberta is Calling campaign. It will continue to offer skilled workers from across the country a glimpse into the life that awaits them here in Alberta.
There is a place in this country where you can afford to own a home. And where you can also benefit from the highest incomes and lowest taxes available anywhere in Canada. That place is called Alberta. We're also launching today a renewed Alberta is Calling campaign out west in Vancouver. And we've chosen Vancouver and Toronto for a very obvious reason, because these are two great Canadian cities, but increasingly they've become unaffordable for ordinary families to make a living and to own a home in the Greater Toronto and Greater Vancouver regions. Alberta has long been one of the most prosperous parts of Canada. But what Torontonians and Vancouverites may not know is that we have the highest incomes in the country and the lowest taxes. But the cost of living difference now is dramatic.
National Day of Truth and Reconciliation is coming up on September 30th, but Southern Alberta Institute of Technology is apparently not recognizing it as a statutory holiday. That is according to Alberta Union of Provincial Employees. AUPE says even though classes will be canceled on September 30th, employees at the Calgary Post-Secondary are being instructed to come into work. AUPE Vice President Bobby Jo Bority says it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. We've yet to receive rationale as to why SAIT has once again made a last-minute decision on this matter. And unfortunately, this year they have decided that it will not be honored as a statutory holiday. They indicated that they had conferred with stakeholders, of which we were not a stakeholder group that was consulted, and that it was, however, shared that it should be a day to reflect, pause, and honor the struggles that Indigenous peoples in Canada have gone through, but they have decided not to give it as a holiday to staff. Instead, they are encouraging them to participate in various activities that they have planned on campus, with the caveat that they have manager approval to do so.
AUPE represents around 400 support staff at SAIT. In an email to Bridge City News, Jill Purdy from the communications team at SAIT said even though they will be open on September 30th, they have canceled classes and labs for a day of reflection and learning. A new report from Stats Canada says there's been a significant number of excess deaths in Canada that happened during the pandemic, but were not caused directly by COVID-19. Excess deaths are unexpected or unanticipated deaths. During the last half of 2021, there were nearly 8,000 excess deaths in Canada that were not caused directly by the virus. Marnie Cathcart, Director of Communications with the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, also checked out the report and joined Hal Roberts from Edmonton to discuss this in more detail.
Marnie, you say this is an alarming trend.
It is a very alarming trend that we have excess deaths coming out of COVID from people who did not pass away from COVID, but died of other causes. For example, Stats Canada says deaths in 2020-2021 were higher among young Canadians, 52% higher in Alberta, 49% higher in BC than expected, and 36% higher in Saskatchewan.
So what does the Canadian Medical Association have to say about the main reasoning behind so many of these excess deaths?
So they're pointing to two main causes, canceled and delayed medical procedures, where people who had their essential surgeries canceled or delayed. They're saying that may have contributed to more than 4,000 excess deaths in Canada just between August and December of 2020. And they're also attributing it to drug overdoses, a 96% increase in drug overdose deaths from April 2020 to March 2021. We think that lockdowns caused feelings of isolation and stress and anxiety, a lack of access to normal supports. And we do know that coming out of the period of lockdowns, there was more incidence of mental illness, and that would correspond to the increase in drug overdoses and deaths.
Thanks so much, Marnie. That was Marnie Cathcart, Director of Communications with the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, joining us from Edmonton.
Coming up on the other side of the break, a look back at how Alberta honored Queen Elizabeth II.
There was a sense of closure, there was a sense of saying goodbye, and as they say, goodbye to Queen Elizabeth, hello to King Charles III. So it's interesting that it's perpetual. You know, one goes, and I do love the idea that the monarchy is above politics.
Welcome back. Canadians gathered in multiple cities on Monday to pay their final respects to Queen Elizabeth II. A special ceremony was held on the Legislative Grounds in Edmonton, coinciding with the state funeral for the Queen in London and Canada's national commemorative ceremony held in Ottawa. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says the Queen was loved by so many.
More than 1 million mourners gathered in a solemn pilgrimage of gratitude and remembrance for a woman who was the bedrock of our common lives together. And countless others around the world have found their own ways to mourn not just her demise, but the end of the Elizabethan era.
There was a sense of closure, there was a sense of saying goodbye, and as they say, goodbye to Queen Elizabeth, hello to King Charles III. So it's interesting that it's perpetual. You know, one goes, and I do love the idea that the monarchy is above politics. She went through 15 prime ministers, didn't go through, she greeted 15 prime ministers. So in a way, you do see that endlessness, and some of the jewels she wore went back to the 1500s, the 1600s. It really is continuity. And I think, you know, Canada is part of the British Commonwealth, and we see that continuity, and it connects us to England.
The Queen had a special fondness for this, our country, that we are so privileged to share, and Albertans were deeply honored to welcome the Queen to our province on numerous occasions. Each of these memorable visits was a valued opportunity for Albertans to show a deep love and regard for our monarch and to celebrate the valued principles, attitudes, and strengths that we share as Canadians and as members of the Commonwealth family.
Premier Jason Kenney flew to London last weekend, he says, on his own dime to pay respects to the Queen. Kenney said he was there on behalf of Alberta and waited around 14 hours to be able to get a glimpse of the British monarch. He says he was doing briefings and work calls while waiting in line. Kenney said when he was 14 years old, he woke up in the early hours of the morning during a trip to Victoria to make sure he had a spot to see Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. He said after that, he promised himself he would be in attendance someday for the Queen's funeral. Many from around southern Alberta, including past and present members of the Royal Canadian Legion in Lethbridge, took part in a memorial service that coincided with the Queen's funeral last Monday. Angela Stewart explains how a former member of the British Armed Forces who worked with the Queen for the last 8 years and said it was truly an honor.
That dedication of her service emulates to citizens.
It was a solemn ceremony Monday as members of the Royal Canadian Legion, Army cadets, and the public paid their respects to Queen Elizabeth II on the same day the monarch was laid to rest at Windsor Castle.
Here in our city, we wanted to recognize and give thanks and honor her for her long reign and service. If you notice in the crowds, there's also some British flags and some British citizens that are also part of the community who came out to pay their respects.
Jim Standen, a former recovery mechanic who served in the British Armed Forces under the Queen's reign for 8 years, recalls one of his fondest memories of her.
I remember when my dad was in the army and his regiment having to paint grass so it was green for a parade that she had to come and do. They literally had to paint the grass green because it was brown. That's one of my biggest memories of actually seeing the Queen when I was younger.
She dedicated her life to public service, including devoting her time to the military. Standen says she's had a big impact on veterans.
Not only did we lose a boss, but we lost commander-in-chiefs of numerous regiments. It's a sad loss for everybody.
It was very heartwarming, for sure, to have those that were here gathered together to pay the respects.
When asked about the Queen's service to the Commonwealth and what she meant to Canada, Mayor Blaine Higgins says she's always had the ability to bring people together, and it's something she will always be remembered for.
There's always that respect for someone that had the knowledge and had the ability to just bring people together and show love, compassion. And it's something that a lot of times we need to look up to.
For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
The United Conservative Party in Alberta will be choosing its new leader soon. Up next, we hear from the son of a longtime political voice here in the province. The late Ted Byfield's Alberta Report made many sit up and pay attention, but his legacy and family business lives on. After the break, a conversation with Vince Byfield. Welcome back. There are many opinions and voices that ebb and flow throughout the news cycle. One longtime political voice was that of the late Ted Byfield and his Alberta Report. For many, politics is a family business, and Ted's son, Vince, is no stranger to the passion, the politics, and the voices that have made people pay attention. Vince Byfield joined me earlier this week from Calgary to discuss passion and politics. Vince, you have a steady following on social media. People like to hear what you have to say. So as you've been meeting with or attempting to meet with the UCP leadership candidates, what have you observed from them?
Well, actually, I've now met with 4 of them, and I've got Rebecca this afternoon now, so that will be 5. Leela, I don't think there's been no action there, but my take so far has been, first of all, I want to just say they're all exceptional. They're all really good, and in a beautiful world, they would all work together. Mm-hmm. I paint this idea of, one of the things about a ranked balloting system is I present the possibility, I'll grant it, that is very, very remote, but what if they all got exactly the same number of votes? Well, then nobody drops off, right? So the ranked ballot, essentially they all then become premier. And if you could imagine a world where we had 7 premiers, I had to say, although it's very unlikely, I think I couldn't ask for a better blend of Albertans than those 7 individuals, right? There's 4 women to 3 men, which is probably a good thing, and they really have a broad spectrum of skills and experiences to bring to the table that in many ways complement one another. And I thought, frankly, we're really lucky to have them all engaged in the process. They're all good. The problem is pride kicks in, and they all want to be top dog. And so there's essentially the 2 camps. There's the Freedom camp, that would be Danielle Smith and Todd Loewen. And there's the quote unquote Kenny camp, the people who were still in his cabinet, Travis Toews, Jean Shawnee, Leela here, and Rebecca Schultz. And then there's that middle person, Brian, who we're never sure, is he going to be flipping over to the Kenny crowd, or is he going to try and appeal to the Freedom crowd? Sometimes he says one thing to one, sometimes to the other. So I'm gathering he's trying to create a centrist position. I think they're all very good, quite frankly. I think we would be well served with it if any of them became leader.
That's really kind of you to say. This close to the election date, is there one candidate that you feel is better suited for the leadership position?
For me, it's down to Todd Loewen or Danielle Smith. For me, the other one that I think is a really serious candidate is Travis himself. But the problem I have with Travis is that he played a pivotal role in what went down in terms of the lockdown. He is the senior ranking rural cabinet minister and MLA in the caucus. And I think that if he had stood his ground, which I believe as a Christian he should have, then two things would have happened. First of all, there's a very real possibility that Jason would have reversed course because Travis, in many ways, represents the entire rural electorate to Jason. So when Travis says, I will back you, Jason may very well have interpreted that to mean all of rural Alberta backs me. There are these few people out there, and you see that in his comments. He talks about, a bright light attracts a few bugs. That's a line from Preston Manning, and Jason said it many times. That tells me he was thinking of the few that were getting through his silo and actually penetrating. He interpreted it as a small group, kind of like the gentleman in Ottawa who talked about a fringe minority with unacceptable views. Very similar, and that was primarily because of Mr. Taves. So he's out, in my view, because I think that's a test of character, which unfortunately he did not pass.
Vince, what do you think your father, Ted, would say about the selection of candidates?
He supported Jason even when this was happening. And I was quite surprised by that. I don't think that my brother Link would have felt the same way. I think Link and I would have been very much of the same mind. But Dad, if I were to say, to be honest, I suspect my dad would have supported Travis Taves.
We need to take a quick break, but when we return, we take a look at a booming industry that all started with a popular little green plant. You may have heard of it. Stay with us. Welcome back. Southern Alberta is known for its valuable crops like grains and vegetables, but did you know hemp is also produced here? It's a versatile product, and as the industry grows, it has the potential to create so much value for us here in Southern Alberta, from an alternative to plastics, durable fabrics, and even helping to keep food fresher longer. Who knew? Joining me to talk about this amazing plant is Darren Bonder of Hemp, Alta. Take a look. Can you explain how the hemp plant and the plant that marijuana comes from are different?
It comes from the same plant, the cannabis sativa plant. The essential difference is that hemp has below 0.3% THC, so it doesn't have any psychoactive effects, and that's why we were able to use it for industrial purposes.
You work with and you study this product every day. So what do you see as the future possibilities for products made out of hemp? It almost sounds like the sky's the limit.
Yeah, the possibilities are really endless, and as we hear every day, we need to make big changes to sustain the climate and really the planet. So we're doing everything from hemp bedding to cat litter to the food preservation paths to soil amendments. So we're really focused on the consumer good aspects, at least Hemp Alta is. But yeah, there's lots of different industrial applications. We can do hemp wood, hemp insulation, just a lot of products that can be made out of the natural properties and strengths of hemp that aren't chemical based. And like hemp insulation is a really great example and something we can make. Instead of putting pink insulation into your homes, which are, petrol based, and then you breathe it for the next, 40 to 50 years, you can use hemp, which is all natural and it still has the same properties, keeps your house warm or cool, and all natural straight from a plant. So there's really 25,000 plus different uses. And it's really just kind of getting more processing capacity out there and educating the public about the endless possibilities.
Amazing. Now, so Darren, on the processor side, obviously there seems to be so many opportunities. So I know recently we interviewed someone who builds electric motorcycles, and the body panels for the bikes are made out of hemp. So what kind of equipment would your factory need to create body panels or even shipping crates for that matter?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we've taken one step where we can separate the hemp stream into all of these different byproducts. But then to formulate things like, as you say, like car panels is really popular. It does take another couple of steps, and there's a lot of innovation in Alberta that's being worked on for the last 20 plus years since hemp became legalized in Canada. And now it's really up to the entrepreneurs and to kind of take this great science and this great engineering that's being developed and help commercializing it and bring it to market. So there's still some steps that need to be taken, but I think Canada still has an opportunity to be a leader. It needs to catch up with Europe a little bit, who's a little bit more advanced, but Alberta is definitely a hotbed for it, and the opportunity is there.
Can you give us an idea maybe of how much hemp is actually grown here in Alberta?
I believe in Alberta, in Canada alone, the last statistics I think are from 2020, and there were 20,000 hectares, and Alberta was responsible for growing 8,000 of those hectares. So Alberta is a great climate for growing hemp, specifically, obviously in the grow season from May to October, but it's a very hardy plant. Farmers like it because it helps regenerate their soil, so it's very good for farmers to grow. They've got a captive market for hemp hearts, which is the seed. And now that there's some processors like us, Hemp Alta, we're one of the only, we're able to kind of what we call full plant utilization. So we're able to provide those farmers with an additional source of revenue. These big bales will no longer be sitting on their field looking to be, just compost or burned. And we're able to turn those into more commercial products. So I think there's a really great opportunity in Alberta. We hope to kind of fill that gap. We've started in a small way. And, as consumers adopt our products, I'm sure we'll be able to scale to a pretty significant size.
Mm-hmm. So what would it take for more farmers in southern Alberta to start growing it?
Well, they just need a market for the seeds. So I think pretty much all the seeds are being grown. I think farmers know that are being bought anyway. And I think farmers know the benefit of growing hemp, as I just talked about. It's very important to regenerate their soil without chemicals and stuff. It's a weed, right? So it is actually quite good for their soil. And now that they have the opportunity to sell the whole stalk, and we have this full plant utilization, I think we're heading in the right direction, and more farmers will adopt as long as there's demand.
We need to take a quick break, but when we return, what does the future hold for small family businesses in southeastern Alberta? We'll tell you after the break.